All right, so am going to talk about the political pushback to financial institutions, primarily incorporating climate change understandings into their activities and their investment. And I'm looking at it to actually weave through, since I only have 15 minutes, the presentation, two real questions. One is, why have the culture wars in the United States jumped the tracks? Why do we now see the very strong politically motivated pushback to environmental, social, and governance, or CSR, understandings? And also, I think there is woven through the regulatory theory question that both speakers have already put on the table, which is, what can we reasonably expect from soft law? So I'm going to look at what we see as the context. I think one of the important factors that explains why the culture wars have jumped the tracks is that we are now seeing elites' rhetorical commitments to stakeholder governance. Whether these rhetorical commitments actually translate into actions is a very interesting question. But at least when you have the Business Roundtable in the United States, which is a collection of the CEOs of the top 500 companies in the United States, explicitly rejecting shareholder primacy and claiming that companies have responsibilities to all stakeholders, this is a moment. And this moment happened in August 2019, as presumably most people here know. It was also part of, or related to, or supported by the British Academy. This is Future of the Corporation project under Colin Mayer's leadership, and articulating that the purpose of the business is to solve the problems of people and planet profitably and not profit from causing problems. And at the same time, in Davos, not to be outdone, the Davos Manifesto from 2020, again articulating a stakeholder view of the corporation, which is not unusual for the World Economic Forum. It was, formed as an outgrowth of stakeholder capitalism. But I think that that's part of the context that explains the culture wars. But more specifically, when you have major financial institutions starting to articulate concerns about inclusion, about diversity, about climate change, about economic inequality, then the Republican, and it is a Republican pushback, as I will show you, Republican political party. The context for why have financial institutions started to make these connections and started articulating commitments to things like EDI, equality, diversity, and inclusion, or net zero by 2050. One context, one part of the answer is that more value today in companies is not tangible assets, but intangible assets such as brand and reputation. So if you're British Petroleum and you have, a horrible tragedy that kills people and despoils the environment for a long time, your stock price suffers. And actually BP's stock underperformed other oil and gas companies for about 5 years after the Deepwater Horizon blow up. Now, looking specifically at climate change, which is where I think really the right wing decided to get serious. We also see financial institutions recognizing that climate change is a risk, is a financially material risk to almost every industry, at least at some time frame, and that the costs of these risks are not being incorporated in the markets. So I agree that, you know, pricing negative externalities is going to be a mechanism that might really matter here. Then we have Larry Fink, and Larry Fink, BlackRock CEO. In 2018, he has apparently been writing letters to the BlackRock investors for you know, over 10 years. But in 2018, his letter articulated the idea that companies have to do more than make money for their shareholders. That in today's world, they need to have a purpose. And that was a shot across the bow as well. And he has said that the reason he cares about climate risk is because the investors in BlackRock care. And some of those investors are public pension funds who have very long-term liabilities and do recognize that climate change is going to affect not only their economic outcomes over a long time frame, but the world in which their beneficiaries will retire. And I think the Dutch pension funds have been quite clear about this, that they need to think about what kind of world their beneficiaries will retire into. You also have large aggregations of institutional investors, Climate Action 100 plus, $68 trillion of assets under management, engaging with companies. And we're going to hear a paper about, you know, what do these engagements with companies actually produce? I think that's a great question. But, you know, they've been, Climate Action 100 plus has been very clear about engaging with high emitting companies, asking them, what is your transition plan? And presumably voting against directors and voting for shareholder proposals where the transition plans are insufficient. So I would say these are all contextual factors. This one is, you know, this one is so ironic. Every year before its confab in Davos, the World Economic Forum engages McKinsey or one other very large survey provider to develop a survey about what CEOs and government officials think are the top risks to the world economy. And for the last few years, climate change types of risks and environmental biodiversity collapse have been top of mind. One of the risks that the great and good regularly see is the failure of climate change action. And they are responsible for it. So anyway, okay, with 5 minutes left, I better go a little faster. What do we have in terms of private climate governance? On disclosure, we have the TCFD, Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, very well established, although a young initiative, not even 10 years old yet, but a number of countries are incorporating TCFD into mandatory disclosure. Where I think the rubber really hit the road for the right wing in the United States was this, GFANZ, the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. Because this is when we see $130 trillion of global financial capital saying we are going to transition to net zero by 2050. And GFANZ, which was, you know, the outcome from the COP process 2 years ago, also has, you know, sort of coordinated Net Zero Banking Alliance and the Net Zero Insurance Alliance and the Net Zero Asset Managers Alliance. So I would call these private climate governance for substantive outcomes, not just disclosure. All right. How have these been received? Very badly from the Republicans. First of all, they put together possibly 3 years ago, something called the State Financial Officers Foundation. These are state treasurers in oil, gas, and coal producing states in the United States, led by West Virginia, including Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. No, not New Mexico. New Mexico is a Democratic administration. What they are doing is ensuring that their state pension fund does not invest with any participants in GFANZ. And they are also helping to get legislation in their states to ensure that the state does not contract with any of the banks or financial institutions that are participating in these net zero initiatives. In 2022, 19 state attorneys general, which is the top legal officer in the state, 19 Republican attorneys general wrote to BlackRock saying, what you are doing by being part of GFANZ creates antitrust problems and you're potentially violating your fiduciary duties. These two arguments, antitrust, fiduciary duty, those are now percolating throughout every state that has a Republican attorney general and throughout the House of Representatives. This month in particular, the House of Representatives at a federal level in the United States is having hearings on all of this, and antitrust and fiduciary duty violations are key to what they are saying. They've also written to asset managers and they have started having oversight hearings. Now, this is a picture of the states where these kinds of anti-ESG, anti-climate statutes have been introduced. And the ones with yellow flags, that's where something has actually passed. Who gets state and city contracts and how pension funds are invested. Now, this is very ironic targeting, because the same banks that are being targeted are actually still the major fossil fuel funders, which is what this chart shows. And this is bringing it up to date till 2022. So what have the Democrats done? In 1 minute. The Democrats have written the opposite letter. One Democrat, the New York City Controller, wrote to BlackRock and said, wait a minute, you went and said that you are still investing in fossil fuels, but as a member of GFANZ, you're not supposed to be investing in fossil fuels. Which is it? Some of the other, so BlackRock and every single one of these banks is between a rock and a hard place, right? They've said they are doing disinvestment. They are not doing disinvestment. They are subject to greenwashing. And they have been very quiet in defending themselves on the fiduciary duty arguments, I think, because they know if they came out roaring, yes, this is consistent with our fiduciary duties, then Client Earth and its allies are going to bring lawsuits. And so I see I need to stop already. I would say two things quickly. One, that we do have finally 15 of the Democratic attorneys general coming to the defense by emphasizing that fiduciary duties do allow incorporation of material financial risks, including climate change. But I think that what we've seen, banks, insurance companies jumping off ship, the insurance companies in particular that had been part of the Net Zero Alliance, over half of them have left the alliance. The asset managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are all saying, oh, we're giving voting rights to our shareholders, so we can't be held responsible. The banks have been very quiet. I think the underlying idea is that we cannot depend on these private governance initiatives to get us anywhere near where we need to go. And it is a very troubling development that well-funded, extremely well-funded political pushback to making any progress. So once again, we are in our situation where the United States of America needs to learn from Europe. Thank you.